speak chiefly to 148 in the tabled by the noble Lord Rosser, who's already provided a eloquent and powerful introduction. So I shall just briefly seek to add some points. And that starts with the reflection on the overall status of no recourse to public funds. This applies to some 1.3 million people who are part of our society, who are contributing to our society. And I think we should ask ourselves some very tough questions about why we ask people to contribute without offering them protection. However, we're today specifically with 148 addressing the issue of victims of domestic abuse. And I would very much hope that every member of your Lordship's House would agree with the statement that the state must not be the facilitator of domestic abuse, that it must not act in ways that traps victims in abusive relationships. And yet it is very clear that the current situation, that is what is happening. And what this amendment seeks to address is to ensure that that does not happen. Now, I've, over the past year, been doing quite a bit of work on no recourse to public funds from a number of angles. And I've spoken to Green Party councillors and asked them to share with me cases that they've dealt with. Because, of course, at the local level, at that very distressing level, it's very often local councillors who have very few tools at their disposal, very few resources at their disposal, who are forced to rush around trying to help, trying to provide support in any way they can. And I just want to quote one person who's been in the situation of being stuck with no recourse to public funds during the COVID pandemic, who just about cobbled together circumstances to survive, and then the pandemic pulled those apart. And I think I just ask your Lordship's House to reflect on this individual, this woman's words. She said, "The Citizens Advice Bureau is a vicious cycle of being referred to the same departments that have already said no." And I think if we think about what that must be like, the circumstances that leaves people in. Now, I note what that means practically, and this is information provided by Women's Aid. And they've noted that women with no recourse to public funds who are caring for children are theoretically entitled to continue support for their children under Section 17 of the Children's Act. Yet, under the Women's Aid Federation of England's No Woman Turned Away project, of 20 women with no recourse to public funds who were fleeing with children in 2017-18, social services either refused outright to fund a refuge space or to provide emergency accommodation for 14 of those 20 women, or in 6 cases, it offered to accommodate the children, but not the mother. These findings show very clearly that women with children who have no recourse to public funds are being refused help despite Section 17 duties, and that the state is actually acting in ways to actually break up families. So we have a situation where victims of domestic abuse are being trapped and families are being broken up by the law. And that, my lords, is why I very strongly believe, and I would hope that the government would see the need to support Amendment 148 or something very like it. And I'll finish with the words from a Women's Aid briefing, a simple, bold statement that I really would ask the government, do they not agree with? No survivor should be left without access to a safety net, and it is essential the bill delivers reforms to no recourse to public funds. Those are the words of Women's Aid, my lords. I very profoundly agree with them, and I hope the government will too. Thank you, my lords.